All right. So, hi, my name is Ray Peck. I'm a community manager at GitLab, and we're going to kick off the package team office hour for April 2020. And without further ado, I guess Tim, I'll turn things over to you and get this one started.
Okay, cool. Yeah, a couple of things on the agenda today. The first one is more of an announcement. So the GitLab has officially announced that they're moving 18 features to open source, and included in that is the core package registry functionality. So being able to set up GitLab as a remote repository, being able to authenticate using your GitLab credentials, and then being able to publish and install packages from GitLab will all be moved down to the core edition. In the agenda that's linked from the issue, I've also included a link to the epic that tracks this work. So there's some work required to move the front end and the back end and a bunch of other components and tests from the enterprise edition to the core edition. So we'll be planning that work over the next several months. But we're hoping that this makes this feature broadly available for the community and more people can take advantage of this in the lower price tier. So I'm really excited about that. That was my big announcement that I wanted to make. Hopefully, the next thing I wanted to talk about was give Ethan a chance to talk through what he's working on with Go and ask any questions or get any feedback on his MR.
So I've been working on the Go equivalent of a package repository, which because Go is kind of a VCS based dependency management system. So dependency fetching comes down to pulling from a VCS. So the Go proxy Go calls its dependency management stuff the Go proxy, or at least that is a intermediate layer that provides some functionality that makes things simpler when fetching dependencies, so that they don't have to always be fetched directly from Git or Mercurial or SVN. But because the Go ecosystem does behave this way, it has some key differences from other VCSs or from other package management systems like NPM, where you push a package. So with Go, everything comes from source. You don't push a package, you push a tag, and that defines a version. So the Go proxy is kind of an outlier as far as all of the package repository systems that GitLab has incorporated. The proxy, the initial MVC of the proxy is in review. There's AppSec just posted some comments, and then there's a few other things like I missed a spec or two. So it's in final review. Hopefully that will make it into GitLab soon. There are many other useful additions that could be made. And I've started posting issues for those. That's about it, unless someone has a question.
Hey, Ethan, a quick question. Is there some way that you feel like we could be helping you more with your contribution?
At this point, with the proxy MVC, it's not, it's pretty much done. There's some, Steve, I think, made a comment about using factories, and I've been having some fun with those factories and trying to figure out how to get them to do what I want. But other than that, I'm not having any issues really.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're hoping with the office hours that we could call out anything that we could help with. And so if there's anything you particularly need help, Steve is, I understood, helping you out in general. So anything beyond that, this is the time to ask. So yeah, if you're good, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yep. Yeah, I guess questions I have are more along the lines of, future direction kind of things. And one thing I would really love is to see the Go packages in the UI, but because the Go proxy is source based, there's the user action to create to release a module is to push a Git tag, not to interact with an API. So unlike NPM, there's no straightforward place to create database entries. I managed to get it working without database entries, but it's mildly horrific. So that's not a great way of moving forward. So I think it'd be worth talking about what is the best way, or what is the first way to get entries into the database for the Go packages.
And you commented in the MR and the issue as well, some ideas, right? Like one potential idea was to do it on some sort of schedule. Another idea was to have it be action-based. So like when a Git tag was pushed to make an update.
Yeah, when a Git tag is pushed, or, when a user queries the API, I mean, it's a relatively straightforward thing to do. It's more of a question of where does it fit? How does it fit into the existing system? One thought was at least initially having an explicit API endpoint that when a user wants packages to appear, they post to update Go packages or something. And that could be a simple way to initially get things in the database. And then if that works, once all that's working, then maybe we could move forward with hooking into other things like Git pushes.
Yeah, I think this is probably worth discussing more in the issue. I'm not sure, unless Steve, because I wouldn't want to say that we're super clear. I'm certainly not on how the Go proxy works in terms of where you would inject that stuff into the database so that we could have, have this sort of that stuff in the UI the way we would like. I mean, I think we would all like, I don't want to speak for everyone, obviously, but I think we'd all like to see that in the UI sort of be first party and in line with the other sort of package managers-ish. We also do have the dependency proxy, which is intended to operate like that. We're planning on building in, so that might align better with the way that works-ish. But that's something else to think about. I don't know if you have thoughts, Steve, on where that might sort of tie in with the database entry or not, and not to put you on the spot or anything, but.
Yeah, I haven't really thought it through. It's one of those things that, like, it seems simple enough, but knowing where it's actually going to happen and how that's going to work is another story. Given that it might actually happen in a area of code that's not directly within the package code that we aren't as familiar with. Yeah, I think there's certainly some investigation to do, and we can add some info into the issue as we figure some things out.
Cool.
I had a question. How extendable, if there are other package managers or formats, like I think Puppet functions in a similar way to Go modules, where they have configuration files that are hosted in Git, and those are then what is used to generate a package. Could we reuse some of the work that Ethan did for Go modules if there are other package managers that use version control as hosting packages? There's no packages that are explicitly pushed.
I can maybe jump in a little bit on that. Like I've looked into the Go proxy code a little bit, and I think there is some pieces there that we might be able to reuse in terms of the way that the code searches through existing repositories for tags and some other items to identify things. So it just depends on how, like Puppet and these other systems, how they are identifying their source code. If it's a similar pattern, we might be able to extract or use some of that similar code, but not totally sure.
Okay.
can I just ask some questions about the Go packages and how they might appear in the UI, in the package registry? Because, like, I'm not a Go engineer, so I may be misunderstanding how the Go modules work and all of that. So my understanding is that it's the actual repository, the Git repository itself, that is storing the Go package. And the reason why we can't display it in the UI is because it's a repository itself rather than any kind of entry in a database or collection of files that might exist in storage somewhere, similar to how other packages work. So my thoughts is that if you're going to hook into any kind of Git event, so say you publish a new tag to your repository and you want that to publish a version of your Go package in the package registry, there's an implicit sort of link there that you may want, or you might think that you want this particular Go package to appear in the package registry for that Go project. Yeah. So if you've got a GitLab Go project, it's hosting your registry, and you do a Git push to it for a new version of your module, and it will publish into the package registry inside that project. You might have that. That might be one scenario, but that's not how the rest of the package registries work, is it? So the package registry on any project can have a package from anywhere else. It doesn't have to be a package that exists in that project. So my thoughts are, like, instead of hooking into a Git event on the Go package itself, why don't you flip it and allow the user to add a Go package to a project itself? So from a UI point of view, let's say you go to the package registry list, you click a button saying add package, you put in your Go module repository address and the tag that you want, and then it will fetch the artifacts or whatever is required, and then store that as a package inside that particular project. So instead of trying to do something automatically, just allow the user to sort of fetch packages, like sort of flip it a little bit. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever. Probably haven't done a very good job of explaining it.
It does make sense. So to clarify, pre-Go 1.12, I think, packages were, a Go. So in Go, a package means a folder with code in it. And pre-1.12, Go didn't have any kind of well-defined versioning or anything like that. Now, a module is a tree in the repository that has a go.mod file, and a version of that module is a git tag that matches semantic versioning. So just to clarify, that's the MVC is dealing purely with the new module and git tag way of doing things. What you said definitely makes sense. That hadn't occurred to me. So my goals, my goal with the proxy MVC is I wanted to add the ability to fetch source code from GitLab via the proxy protocol instead of via directly through Git. And I was envisioning that as I have my project on GitLab and I want to fetch it through the proxy. With some additions, such as a change to the middleware that responds to go get queries, that could, so that if that middleware is modified, then modern versions of Go will automatically use that proxy. And with the proposed authentication mechanism for Go that hopefully will come out in 1.15 that supports headers, that should make it much simpler to fetch private projects. So what you're saying does make sense. That it's not what occurred to me at first was a path to fetch projects and, a path to fetch private projects. And from a UI perspective, from a user perspective, I want to be able to see a list of what packages my project defines, or what modules. So I want to see, one of my desires is to be able to go to my project in GitLab and just see a list of here are your modules, here are the versions of those modules. And that for a given project comes from Git as opposed to from a user action. And you're talking about adding other, saying, I want to proxy this project or this Go module through this project, which makes sense. And I actually opened an issue that's similar to that. But as far as what are the versions that what are the modules and the versions of those modules that this particular repository serves, requiring a user action before displaying that, I think would be extra friction. Does that make sense?
I think I'm a little confused. Maybe you can clarify. So like the actual project, the repository, the Git repository is a like sort of single Go package entity. And so all of the tags represent different versions of that.
If it has a Go mod file.
If it has a Go mod file. But then in addition to that, then there's the proxying of all of the dependencies that live within that module.
So the MVC is not a dependency proxy. Go calls it a Go proxy. That's, a way of thinking about it is Go's package fetching intermediate thing. So it's not necessary. I guess it behaves like a dependency proxy, but this implementation does not. So this implementation purely just exposes a given project.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure I understood. So yeah, so then I think as a first iteration, it might be good, on a given Go project page, if you go to the package tab and maybe there's a way to just like click a button or something saying like, I want to add the Go information for this project. And then it will know that repository in that project is a Go package and just list out all of the tags and any other information from the mod file. So that way it pretty much will populate that tab for you for that given project. And then I think what Nick was sort of alluding to was like, let's say I just created an empty project, but wanted to list all of my Go packages and modules there for some reason, just so I have a place to reference it. Then I could, put in all of those different URLs and it would list all of them in one place, even though there's not necessarily code living there.
So what I hear you saying is when you click on that tab, scan the repository for a list of tags, there might be a good way of doing it. I made that work and it's really hacky. So the way the package interface and the backend and the finders and the pagination and all of that works, if you don't have active records, it gets ugly. So you need an ID. To be able to click on the packages, you need an ID. And I generated the ID by hashing the package path and then taking a certain chunk of the hash and turning it into an integer, which is nasty. So there might be a way to do that. The current infrastructure really expects you to have database records.
Okay, cool. That's very helpful.
If you look, I'll post a link to the issue, but if you look at the branch I made, you can see what I've done and it's not pretty.
I think it would make sense to do something similar to the other package managers. So have some dedicated tables on the database or somewhere that we can save that data and just use some hooks around the Git operation. So every time someone creates a tag, go find if there is a Go mod file inside that source code, and if so, do something on the database. Because doing that scanning every time that you query the database or go to the UI takes a lot of time and it's hacky, as Ethan said.
And the proxy could also benefit from that. If they're stored in the database, then the proxy could, use that instead of scanning.
These Git hooks then, how would they work though? Would they, is the expectation that they would just work for, they would identify that a project is a Go project and just work automatically, or would the user have to opt in to say that this particular Go project is a package or wants to appear in the package registry? Should we offer some kind of configuration for this?
My thought was that the configuration is effectively our packages enabled for this repository. So if the user has enabled packages, then I mean, maybe an extra setting. That was just what I was going with. What I was envisioning for the Git hook is, so currently the scanning looks for filters the list of tags based on semantic versioning, and any valid tags, it then checks if there is a go.mod file, and then there's some extra logic to make sure things are happy. And that's for the list endpoint. You know, there's one of the resources lists valid versions. Some of the other ones fetch a zip, and that will look at that specific tag. It doesn't do a full scan in that case. So for the Git hook, what I was envisioning is checking the pushed, or checking the name of the tag. If that name is a semantic version, then looking at the tree, and if that tree contains a go mod file that's correct, then create a database entry. That's essentially what I was thinking.
And would it only look in that particular project, or would it look at any project? Could you inform it to look at any specific project?
So one of the issues I opened was the ability to say, like we've mentioned, the ability to say project A, the modules defined by project A should be available in the interface of and through the API of project B. So if that was implemented, then yes. Oh, there's a cat. So depending on, you know, future work.
Okay, thanks. Joanne, what do you think? You were just talking about is that in line with what you were thinking in terms of firing using hooks?
Yeah, I think we need to investigate how that is being done under the hood, because I think this is not in the package code exactly. So we might have to touch other parts of the source code to make this work. So probably the first step would be to identify a couple of examples of some Git hooks, see where those happen, and how we can replicate some of that for the package.
Nick, it looks like you might be thinking of a question. I can't tell.
No, not really. I was just still thinking about the UI. Come back to me. I'll have a question in a minute.
Any other questions that you have, Ethan?
Do you plan on creating an epic for all of the issues I've been creating?
I'll create an epic right after this call for the Go. Should I call it the Go proxy or Go repository? Because repository doesn't make sense, right? Because it is Go proxy is the term that Go is using for this, right?
I mean, I think Go repository might work because it will confuse less people.
Okay.
And then when they click on it, you know, the description can contain more details about what that actually means. But if it says Go proxy, I think that might lead people to think it's a dependency proxy, which at this point it's not.
Okay, I'll create that epic and share it with everyone right after this. Okay. Joshin, thanks for being patient. Did you have any questions or comments to add, or do you want to talk about the Composer repository at all?
Regarding Go, well, I'm not a Go person, so I recently started to learn a bit of Go, so I can't tell exactly how it should work or anything that's like similar to Composer. So I think it works. What I heard now, it works differently. So the only thing I got was I think we go in the same way with Composer, not using the runner at all. So we basically made a decision that we just reference the files provided by GitLab in the package JSON file. So yeah, basically the entire Composer's logic has to be rewritten. So we start from scratch from there. And I think Gigi made a lot of notes in the MVP. So like everyone knows how it should work now. So we changed our mind completely, and I think that's the way to go. So we don't need any runner. We simply have the packages by like listing in the package JSON file, in the main entry file, and then just let GitLab itself do the job and provide the package, basically the package files, yeah. So that's about it. I haven't had any time to work on this so far. And I think Gigi is busy as well at the moment. So yeah, I hope I get some time in a few weeks so I can work on this properly again. And after that, maybe we have a stable first version for Composer packages then, yeah.
Okay, great. And I know Gigi's planning on working on it in the upcoming milestone as well. We're prioritizing it, so hopefully we can get something out relatively soon.
Yeah, that would be great.
Ray, anything to add?
No, I think you, with the first announcement you covered, things moving to core, which is great. And then, I'm trying to think of a way to advertise it more broadly to the community. I was definitely gonna, we have a hackathon coming up in about a month. I definitely want to include those items for people to start looking at before the hackathon. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, and then related to that, I think it's May 13th to 14th is a hackathon date. So as for the next call, if it makes sense for you guys, we can just have the next call coincide with the hackathon as well to get a broader audience. But I thought it worked out pretty well in February. So.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ray, I had a question.
Yeah.
What causes you to be aware of a community contribution MR or issue? I've just I've been directly pinged once or twice by people that have started working on stuff, and I just want to make sure that you become aware of them if you want.
Yeah. No, I subscribe to the label. So issues or MRs with the community contribution label, it just all ends up on my inbox. And then these all get auto labeled as well at the end of each workday by the bot. So yeah, that's how I get to see them. And then hopefully I'm not bothering too many people, but I usually try to ping who I think the right reviewers are or who can find the reviewers. So hopefully that's been working out for the package group, but let me know if I'm just creating too much noise and not adding a whole lot of value. But
cool. No, yeah, not at all. It was more of I wanted to make sure I added the right labels to make you see a few issues that you might not have seen.
Yeah.
Cool. And Steve, and Nick, I saw we added a bunch of content to the Epic for moving features to core. I was thinking that it might be worth reviewing that on this call, but do you think that we should maybe save that for next time, or?
I mean, I was mostly just kind of working my way through, making a list of all of the files that need to be moved. I hadn't really thought it through yet, you know, in what order they should be moved or what should happen first. Not in too much depth yet. So, I mean, I'm open to talking about it, but
I think
I was curious, what is the plan now? Are we going to just do it as one big MR to move everything, or like how are you going to split this up in a way that it still works?
yeah, I feel like one MR, if I was assigned to that to review, I'd be like, you know, like 100 files changed. No, I think like the one idea I had was first move the front end over in a way that allows, so like if I click on the packages tab for a core project or as a core user, I can see that tab now. And for those projects, there shouldn't be any packages yet because they didn't have the ability previously to create them. And then as we switch that functionality over, they'll be able to create packages and they'll just start appearing in the front end. And then for projects that already exist, the front end will still just continue to work as it has. And then in terms of moving the back end, we really need to identify what is shared and what is not shared. And so we could start, I was thinking start by moving Maven over because it's the smallest number of files from what I can tell. And then in moving that, we'll kind of figure out what other pieces of code are shared with it. And then when we move those pieces over, we just kind of have to re-reference them in all the other package managers and then sort of one at a time, maybe do an MR for each package manager. That was my initial thought. I'm not sure, based on how the front end works, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel that the front end, if you just move the front end over and expect it to work on core, it's just not going to work because the API endpoint won't exist.
But that's basically the front end is it using controllers or the actual API, the Grape API endpoints?
It's kind of using a mix, but mainly the API. Like for data, it's using the API mostly.
Okay.
I mean, well, okay, the list is using the API, but the detail is using the controller.
So we might be able to, because those APIs are separate from the APIs that are actually communicating with the package managers themselves. There's the APIs that are communicating with package manager clients, and then there's the APIs that are communicating just with the GitLab front end for the most part. So we might be able to move all of that over within one MR.
Okay.
And that's kind of, I think, what we just kind of need to work through with looking at this large list of files, seeing how we can group them.
And another idea that I did have is that we could move the front end over and then just wrap it in a feature flag or have something that basically displays a coming soon message, you know? So the front end just says all the files will be moved across and it will work if you're on EE, but if you're on core, it will just say package registries in the middle of being migrated. Expect the rest of the functionality to come in the next milestone or whatever the time frame is. I don't think that would be too hard.
Maybe I should open an investigation issue.
Yeah, we could try it out.
Okay.
We could also, I'm curious if there are other stages that have done anything like this before, moving something from, you know, premium to core. It'd be helpful to find out if they've had any experiences that might help us.
Jackie on the release team just shared an epic where they just did a similar work or a similar investigation. I could share that. I just have to dig through and find it.
If you look at the branch where I hacked together UI support for Go, that might give you an idea of how the UI interacts. Those are all the little bits that were necessary to get things to show up on the UI.
All right. Anything else that we should talk about before we break? This has been really helpful for me.
And thanks, Ethan and Jochen, for joining. It's really, thanks for your time.
Tim, did you, so the video from our first, we had two meetings, the videos from our meetings, are those on the YouTube channel? Because the AppSec reviewer was asking about our discussion, so I was just going to post a link to those since that's the only offline discussion we had.
They are. I'll send it to you right after this.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, thanks everybody. I guess we'll reconvene in about a month during the hackathon, and have a good one. Stay safe.